By the way, I do have the ability, I have the ability to share, is that correct?
Let me just make sure I've done that. Welcome, everybody. This is the Drone Responders webinar series, a public safety UAS conversation with the FAA. Usually we would be here with Mike O'Shea, but today we are graced with the presence of Steve Pansky, who will be facilitating a discussion that's actually more in line with Steve than it is probably with Mike on waivers. But I'd also like to say we'll get started in just a few minutes, and hang in there for a second or two. And let me make you a co-host. And now you should be able to share whatever you need to share.
Good, good. I've got a couple of slides I'll present as part of what I'm going to talk about here. So,
all right. So everybody still hang in there. We'll give a minute or two for everybody to get in, and we'll get started shortly.
Okay.
Got a thanks for the great FAA UAS and AM symposium last week. JC, good to see you. And somehow I missed you last week, but yeah, it was a great 3 days, especially with the information and the networking. We'll give a few more, just one more minute, and then we'll get started. I know a lot of people are interested in this, and just so everybody knows, this is being recorded and will be available after this event. So if you missed it, those of that registered will have a chance to get access to this. See, we got Don Janelle from balmy Connecticut. Hey, Don. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, it's my pleasure to introduce this time Steve Pansky. He's here in place of Mike O'Shea, who's out on travel somewhere in the Midwest, I think, maybe. Or anyway, I want to give a big thanks to Steve Pansky. Steve has had the most impact of anybody in the FAA on waivers that we all have worked through and received. He's kind of stood in there on our behest and really pushed in some directions that otherwise we would have gotten answers of no. So the FAA was also presented an award this year at the FAA Symposium, Drone Symposium, basically thanking them for Steve's work, Mike's work, John Meehan's work, Kerry Fleming's work. It's been a collective effort of those who know and really work hard for public safety. So with that, Steve, I'm going to open the door for you to talk about waivers, DFR, all those things.
Well, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see if that's going to work here. Nope. No, let me pick the screen. And let me know when you can see that, Charles. And it's probably got your logo on the front of it. Is that correct? Oh, you went silent on me there, so you've got to mute it. But the answer is yes. You can see.
Yes, it's up.
Ah, perfect. So yeah, real quickly, Mike O'Shea is actually in New York City, is where he's at. He's with the New York State Public Safety UAS Conference. He's gone silent on me for the last several days, so apparently he's having a very good time while he's up there. And we process the public declaration letters. He's been a little silent on me here, but I'm sure as soon as he gets back, we'll get that thing spooled back up again and get moving for it. And again, Charles, thank you very much for the opportunity here to talk and speak to the audience here about a whole bunch of different topics, and then we can open it up and have a discussion on everything else that you want to talk about here. But what I'd like to talk about, obviously, is Beyond Visual Line of Sight. There's several different programs that are out there right now. We'll talk about all of them. I'll tell you what the status is of all these programs, as far as how many are being, how many we've seen come through the application process, and then we'll hit a little bit on our favorite topic, remote ID, what's going on there, and then we'll also talk about one that's out there, waivers to operations for 2 UAS being operated by 1 remote pilot in command, and what I know about that, which is virtually very little, but I'll give you what I do know, because I've been I've been prodding the FAA's air traffic organization about that one too, as of lately. And then, like I say, we'll open it up to questions to everybody. So first of all, let me sort of provide you with a round oversight of this whole process here with Beyond Visual Line of Sight. Normally, when you want to operate Beyond Visual Line of Sight, the process, as it's depicted here on this slide, shows a submission that you make to the FAA's 91113 waiver team. What they do is they request that you provide the information that's depicted on the screen. The big piece there is a sort of overall concept of operations, how you're going to conduct the operations, where you're going to conduct them, what kind of a safety assessment you've done in the process to be able to provide an equivalent level of safety to that of operating visual line of sight. And then they'll do the assessment of that information. If necessary, they'll reach out to the other lines of business to get their input on the information you've provided, and then ultimately come back to you with a response. Sometimes they will be asking you as an applicant to actually come and prepare on a Zoom call or a Teams call a presentation to the FAA, and they'll bring all the lines of business in so they can have a better understanding of what the request is. It's a very difficult, I don't say difficult process, but it can be very time consuming, and it can be very complex because you do have to provide a lot of information, especially information on safety, that in essence, they have to utilize that as a means of determining that it's safe to allow you to operate in the NAS with a program that is either addressing maybe a technology, a ground-based detect and avoid, or an airborne detect and avoid system that you're utilizing as a means of being able to operate is what it is, in compliance with being able to see and avoid. So that information is something that they're looking for when they do that. So this, again, is the slide that sort of outlines all that information.
Hey, Steve,
Yes, go ahead.
I did get an ask if you could go to full screen in a slide view instead of this view, because they're they said it's a little bit harder to see.
Okay, I may have to change slides here. Hold on a second to do that. But let's see if I can. Nope.
You might have to go back out.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go out of it, and then
open it up, go to the slide view, and then open that window, because there'll be two windows there. Your original presentation.
Yes, you're all right. So let me do that. I want to do this so I don't drop out of the program here. So
don't leave me here alone, or I'll have to make some. I'll make some dramatic changes in what's been put.
Let me expand out of here. Where's the exit out of it? Is what I'm looking for here, which it's not allowing me to do here.
Did you stop sharing?
Yeah, I can't find the button to stop the sharing is what it is.
Let me see if I can do it here for you.
Can you do it for me?
Yep, there you go.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Let me reload this back in real quickly here. And as soon as that comes back up, I'll put it in the format, and then I'll grab it again here. Come on, load up.
Yeah, we missed you at the FAA Drone Symposium, but we heard that you were very active in the background of zooming in and answering questions for your colleagues that were there.
Yes, I did, and I understand that that's just the AUVSI symposium, correct?
Well, it was the FAA Drone Symposium supported by AUVSI.
Exactly. Yeah. So let me share again. This time I'm going to share on the right side. And then what I'm going to do is, and you should see the whole screen this time.
Yep,
there we go.
We're good.
Perfect. There we go. All right. So you've seen that. You've seen this one. Oh, come on. Oh, it's running slow because it's a presentation. Come on. Okay, we've talked about that. Okay, so we talked a little about Drone as a First Responder was one of those programs, and this is the Chula Vista model that a lot of people refer to. But the drone as a first responder was a means by which you would use either a visual observer and a pilot in command. And by looking out and seeing the aircraft over a distance, you could launch the aircraft out to that location and be the first responder on the scene is what it is. Like a lot of these other programs, the drone as a first responder did require that you be a public agency to be able to apply for this particular request and approval. And we've seen about 38 of these drone as first responder requests come in. These are a little different again from the previous slide I showed you, which was the beyond visual line of sight, because that incorporates not just public safety agencies, but it also incorporates any other entity that is looking for a beyond visual line of sight approval with an aircraft weighing more than 55 pounds that is not applying for beyond visual line of sight under the Part 107 program. So they use the 91-113 waiver process to do that. A lot of those that are processed, by the way, under that program are experimental aircraft that want to do those kinds of operations and test technologies and whatever. So they'll get the beyond visual line of sight approval for their experimental certificates that they're operating under. So those are what those are happening for. So that's drone as a first responder. Then we figured out real quickly here that it didn't make sense that everybody actually started to, we found out there's a trend, there's a list of potential provisions that if you followed those, we would be able to automatically give you approval. So we actually developed this next program, which was the tactical beyond visual line of sight program. And in this one, actually, instead of being at a location and launching the aircraft out to that location, you actually were at the scene of the event. And this allowed you really to be able to fly beyond visual line of sight for a minimum period of time for a unique operation, such as, let's say, an overturned tanker truck where you had to get behind it because it had fumes coming out and you wanted to fly in to take a look and see what the labeling was on the side of the truck so you can determine what kind of chemicals it's releasing. Or you went behind the house because you didn't want to jump over the fence and find the pit bull standing in front of you there. You wanted to take a look and see what was going on behind it. And that way is what it was. And also for search and rescue type operations where maybe you had a canopy above you and you launch above the canopy and you lose sight for a small period of time, but it gets you a little bit of distance to get out there to be able to see that too is what it is. So the tactical beyond visual line of sight has been very successful. And over the, I think it's 2.5 years, we have been doing this right now, almost 3 years, we've been doing them. Over 446 processed applications have happened at this point. And now we're starting to see a lot of them that are renewals because they're coming up after 2 years as such, and they're starting to get renewed COAs. And so they're reapplying for the tactical as part of their approval. And they're obviously you're getting approved, but we're seeing another surge of tacticals coming on board is what it is. So this is another one. Again, only time you can operate under this is with actually having a COA already, and then you'd apply for the tactical through the 91-13 waiver team, and then you would go back, apply for a new COA, and receive the tactical as part of the operation. So lately, what we did is we found out something here we did after working a little bit. We submitted a request to air traffic and said, look, we've seen what happened with the civil operators such as Wing, where they were given some approvals to be able to operate. And the operation and the safety risk management that was done on that particular operation said, hey, look, if you're out there and you can protect the airspace around where you're operating, then it should be able to operate. And we said, well, that should apply to us in public safety is what it should apply to. So we had and we prepared and submitted and ran a process. And we did very similar to what we do with tactical. We said, here's a series of provisions. And if they can comply with these provisions and submit those to us that they're going to do this, then we should be able to rapidly be able to approve what we call a first responder beyond visual line of sight. And the interesting thing about this one is that you really don't have to see the aircraft. So long as you're protecting the airspace around the aircraft for 2 miles from the launch point until the recovery point, regardless of where it's at, you then now are able to operate in this first responder beyond visual line of sight approval process. And so this one has just started up. I'm saying that we're working on about 3, maybe 4 months. We're already up to 46 first responders that have applied for this particular operation. And so we've seen it starting to see this one start to grow tremendously too. And we're also seeing people not only applying for this at the same time, but they're attaching their tactical to the same COA request. So they're actually having both of those placed in their application at the same time.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with you that we also have templates that we work with you on to create for drone responders in our resource center, so that will help you walk through this. But I wanted to point out what's different about this is instead of going through this full explanation, which would have to be reviewed by a full team of people. It's basically asking for your understanding that you're going to comply to these conditions, which dramatically changed the process and the time approval of that. So I just wanted to thank you for the work you did on this, because it's been a great addition to what we're doing.
Great. And you hit the exact point there, is that rather than that first slide I showed you with all the requirements you have to go through, if you comply with the provisions of that list that's in that, like Charles says, there's a template out there, then all you need to do is apply for that. And we see those turned around rather quickly is what it is. Unfortunately, you've got to go back to the CAPS program and apply for a new COA. In the CAPS program, there's no way to do a renewal because you can't get into the program to actually add the verbiage requesting the additional beyond visual line of sight for the first responder. But it's a simple thing to do, to write a new COA to get that additional access that you're going to get with this program.
Yeah, and two more things I wanted to point out, that it's still important as you're going through your COA that you have a thorough ConOps that shows your operations and how you're going to handle certain things. One, for your own good, but also the reference in the COA. And what was the other thing I was going to say? We'll go on. Maybe I'll think about it here in a minute.
So we have all these great programs for the public agencies that are operating under COAs as public aircraft operators. Unfortunately, there wasn't really anything out there for the Part 107 operators who may be operating public safety type operations, like fire departments that didn't qualify, or CERT teams that don't qualify as public agencies, things like that. So this program actually shows a lot of benefit. It could be something very, very good for the Part 107 operators. And it's available by applying for a waiver through the Drone Zone web site. And you actually applying for a Part 107-31 waiver. And in this operational here, it's only daytime operations. You are restricted to Class G airspace. But if you're obstruction shield, in other words, if you're within 50 feet of the obstruction and you're flying along, you can go beyond visual line of sight to be able to conduct that operation. The requirements, unfortunately, here does require you to go out and purchase some additional equipment, such as automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, ADS-B, in as a requirement, so you can actually see what's out there, and potentially so that you can maneuver your aircraft to ensure you're not going to come in conflict with anybody. They have to have, obviously, VFR VMC conditions, and it's a hard ceiling of 400 feet within Class G airspace is what it is. They are not currently approving operations within controlled airspace. That's Class Delta, Service Class Echo, Class Charlie, or Class Bravo, but I think they are thinking about that for the future is what it is. Actually, I really like this program so much that they're building. I'm sort of prodding the 91-113 waiver team to say, why can't we transition this over to also public aircraft operators and offer something like this to them? So we're looking at maybe we can offer this up as another thing for the public air operators too.
So two questions on that. One, you mentioned Drone Zone earlier, and we've been talking about this CAPS being under Drone Zone for 2 years now. Is that ever going to happen? One.
Yeah, good question. And I'll stop a second here and just tell you, I actually was in a acceptance testing program this morning with the Department of Defense, who was looking at the CADS program, CADZ. That's the COA online in Drone Zone, the CAPS, I should say, in Drone Zone program. It's going to transition out of CAPS and they're going to go into Drone Zone. The DoD is going to be first one to transition over there with their COA applications. And then once they've stabilized that and put it in there, we'll then are going to come smartly behind them with the publics and with the civil operators that are going to be applying for COAs. They would also go through Drone Zone for that operation, as well as we're going to add in there these experimental airworthiness certificate aircraft, those aircraft that are operated under 44807 exemptions, as well as test sites that are operating possibly civil operations, as well as type certificated aircraft that need a COA to operate. We're going to move everybody into CADS is what we're going to do. So they'll all be applying under the same program is what they'll be doing. We are working right now on the provisions and what that new program looks like. It's going to have pretty much the same kind of requirements of information that's going to require you to do in CAPS. However, we're trying to do a lot, give it more flexibility, let's say, for those purposes. One of the big issues we have right now is, and we probably could run a whole drone responders discussion about this topic alone, and I'm willing to do that when we get a little further down the road. But one of the things we're trying to work on here is that when you apply now in CAPS and you want to change over to somebody else to run the operation, or you want somebody else to have availability to go into the program to do monthly reporting, let's say, doesn't work in CAPS. It can't happen. And we have to ultimately go in there and actually manually move your approved applications over to somebody else's email address to make it work that way. In CADS, we've asked them to build a program in there where, in essence, what will happen is you'll get access in the program, and then you'll be able to invite anybody else you want to into your area there, so they can view your applications and they can do any kind of reporting you need to them, and you can transfer over responsibility to that individual too. So it'll do all of that inside. The FAA will be out of that picture. That way you can control who you need to see your applications, who you need to process them, and everything will be done together that way. Greater flexibility for you as an operator to be able to do that. That's one of the benefits I think we're going to see with CADS, is what it is. And so we're looking forward to that, getting over and moving that. Again, I didn't give you a date, Chuck. You heard me. You didn't hear me say what day it's going to happen. I'm hesitant to want to do that, because there's more than just building a program and having transferred over. There's a lot of different moving parts there with approval, not just with the FAA, but with the Department of Transportation being involved in it, as well as all those individuals that have to look at all the documentation that goes along with that transfer, is what it is. And so, yeah, we're pushing hard, but like I said, we're using the DoD as our test bed to make sure that what they're going to be doing makes sense, and then we'll monitor that operation, and we'll actually make ours slightly different than theirs, because they have a different set of requirements that they deal with when they process their applications. But we'll make ours easier actually to transition after them. We believe it'll be a lot easier and a lot quicker is what it's.
Yeah, I would just say, as you're doing your test runs, if you get to the point where you want to have a couple public safety agencies run through it for you, we could probably find some agencies that are about to renew and could go through that process for you.
And that's a great thing to say, because that's exactly what I want to do. When we get to the point where we do acceptance testing, I do want to get some public agencies into that process to look at the submission portion of the application. So you can go in there and you can be able to look at it and determine that, does this make sense, what it is we're asking you to put in the document. Today, if you're operating CAPS and you go into that program, it's very aviation centric. And if you don't have a good working knowledge of aviation, it could be a nightmare in that program, is what it can be. And the other thing we've asked for, and we're hopeful we're going to get, is we want to build short YouTube video clips of each sections of the application. So you have something to refer to. So when you go to that section, you can review the video clip and go, here's what they're looking for in the way of information that goes in that box. So when I fill the application out, I've got a tutorial right there next to me to be able to help me do that. CAPS didn't have that, and that's good at it. So this is going to get us a little further down the road to make it simpler for people to do the application process, is what we really want to do. So that's where we're going with.
Yeah. So back on the obstructed shielding waiver, this can, however, be used by current Part 107 agencies that are public safety, correct? As long as they
sure, absolutely. If you're a Part 107 operator, if you've got pilots that are holding Part 107s, you can operate under a Part 107. You're not held to have to operate as a public aircraft operator, so you can definitely do that.
So I have two questions.
This is an opportunity.
Since our program, since I have taken over our program, our COA expires in November. We don't have any waivers beyond visual line of sight, et cetera. So should I submit a new COA with these waivers?
So if you're going to want to operate under either the tactical beyond visual line of sight or the first responder beyond visual line of sight, which are the easiest ones to do, you'll want to go ahead and go to drone responders, go into their database there, get a copy of those submission forms, fill them out, and you'll send them to the 91-113 waiver team. Get that approval. It should happen very quickly. I'm saying quickly, within a week. I'm saying a business week. We should, if everything's there and it's right, everything going in there will be accepted. Then you can go back in and then go reapply for your new COA, and with those provisions in it, and then they'll issue to you that way. Again, you do have to have a COA already, have been operating under a COA to be able to do this application and apply for it.
Okay, the
Right.
next question is, when a law enforcement drone is used to search for a fleeing suspect, like after a pursuit, sometimes the drone will extend past the line of sight to maintain visual contact with the suspect. How does the FAA look at this type of situation? Does the FRB loss cover this?
Yeah, exactly. That would work well for you because if you're on site there, it doesn't say you have to be sitting in a building and launch it and fly out 2 miles away to do that. It says if you can protect the 2 miles around where that aircraft is at, you can fly out beyond visual line of sight and execute the privileges that'll be in your COA to be able to conduct that operation. So first responder beyond visual line of sight would work for you in that situation.
All right, we're back on track.
Okay, very good. So jumping from there, let's talk to this wonderful topic of remote identification. So real quickly, back in September 16th of last year, all the manufacturers were required to say, listen, if you're going to sell unmanned aircraft after September 16, 2022, it has to be equipped with remote ID, is what it is. And now we've come around almost a year later, September 16, 2023, and now it's the responsibility now of the operators. If you're operating an unmanned aircraft, whether it be a Part 107 operator or a public aircraft operator, or in the case of a 44809 recreational operator who has an aircraft weighing more than 0.55 pounds, it has to be registered. All those scenarios, you have to have remote ID. Let me say that again in a different way. It is recreational operators who have aircraft weighing more than 0.55 pounds have to have them registered with the FAA. That's the trigger. If you have to register your aircraft with the FAA, you have to have remote ID. So if you're operating as a recreational operator, then, and it weighs less than 0.55 pounds, remote ID is not something you have to concern yourself with. As a Part 107 operator or a public aircraft operator, you have to have your aircraft registered with the FAA, regardless of the weight. And of course, if it has to be registered with the FAA, then you have to have remote ID. So that's the requirement that has to be there. So there's two things happening right now. The two questions I'm sure the audience will want to know about. The first question is, I'm a public safety agency. I fly sometimes missions that are very critical, that are sensitive, and I don't want to have the remote ID turned on. Can I get the FAA to tell me that I don't have to operate it? The FAA is working on a program or a plan on how they'll be able to authorize you to be able to do that. However, they haven't come out with the specifics on how that's going to work. They have told us that it's probably going to be based on a specific operational need at that time. It's not going to be a blanket, oh yeah, you're public safety, you can do this all the time. It doesn't require you to have remote ID. That's not going to be the approval. They're going to require you to actually come and say, hey, this is why I need to do this. And then they can give you the authority to be able to do that. The other question that's going to be asked by everybody is, hey, I've been out there trying to buy this stuff and I can't buy it. It's all backlogged. Nobody's selling the products, or they're selling them, but they're telling me it's going to be 2-3 months before I'm going to have a deliverable of a product here right now. And 16th September is right around the corner here. What about you, FAA? Are you going to be violating me when I fly because I don't have the equipment on there? Well, the interesting thing, and I don't know if Charles, if you sat in on any of those meetings at AUVSI FAA symposium last week, but that discussion came up. It was, I understand, really lively. And the FAA clearly heard the audience, and they are having meetings actually this week with senior management to talk specifically about this particular issue. And to say, how are we going to meet this?
I was actually on the remote ID panel, so I can provide some additional insights. One, what the FAA said at that meeting is they realized there is a backlog in a lot of places. Some manufacturers have said, I'm not sending the first one out until I have an order of 5,000 in magnitude, because it doesn't make sense for me to manufacture and do that without that volume. So what the FAA says, we realize there will be shortfalls. The big issue is, as long as you're doing your due diligence, that you're following through, that you have a plan that you're trying to accomplish. And if you've reached out to a vendor and you can't get it, it's going to be what they said, basically a compliance philosophy. We want you moving in that direction. It's an evolution. It's going to take place. Do what you can. Some other things that we learned is that some people ask, how can we even determine if our remote ID is working? Well, there are apps that are coming out. I will mention to you that Drone Responders has partnered with Pierce Aerospace in one of those particular apps that will be out there, that we're actually going to create a working group of public safety to hear what more do you want to hear out of the remote ID as it's captured, because the idea is not only being a one-off, but pulling it into an aggregated database that we can actually use beyond just that particular one-time situation, so that we can actually see if there's some kind of criminal intent happening in multiple places in different locations. This is not an FAA thing. But what we also learned is on the receiving end, the technology is going to be a bit of a problem, because the Apple phones do not allow the Wi-Fi capability. So there are 3 ways that remote ID can transmit: Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 4, Bluetooth 5. And without that Wi-Fi, which we hear is the majority of transmissions, that means if you're using an Apple phone and an Apple app, you may not receive a broadcast that's being given. But that doesn't mean it's not broadcasting. It means just what you're using may not be receiving it. So there is some look at creating a device that can actually receive all 3 of those transmissions. So stay tuned. We hope to have more information. But if you happen to be in public safety and you're interested in being on this working group to help develop that, please let me know. Send an email to charles@droneresponders.org. Now, I've got questions piling up on me here for you. So first one says, if a drone is on the dock and come 9/16, it's not transmitting RD. Okay, I think I answered this one. If you don't have it, you can't do anything about it. The second thing that you brought up is that the exemption that may come from a security type of operation that you have to get permission for. We also learned that there are some manufacturers that have remote ID that don't have ability to turn them off. So that's a discussion that you need to have with your dealers and say, is there a possibility you're developing something? We have heard on some of the aircraft, there may be a firmware update that can actually fix that to give you that capability, but you can only turn it off when you've been given permission by the FAA. So let's see, the next question. Remote ID is a huge issue, serious lack of mark. No, I think I answered that one. So under 55 pounds don't need to be remote ID compliant. No, that's not true. If you have to register it, you have to have remote ID. Would the process potentially look like the SGI process for public safety flying without the remote ID? I think that's what you were saying. Yes, it will be a process that you have to go through, correct?
And we're not sure who's going to be that responsible. It makes sense that probably the System Operations Support Center would be the logical entity to be able to nod their head to say, yes, you're based upon that, you're authorized to operate without remote ID. But again, they haven't made that decision yet, how that would be. But you need to have somebody, obviously, that you need to call immediately to be able to get that approval is what it's going to be. Okay.
Okay, let's see. So we have a total of 9 UAS at this time, all are DJI. Only 1 of 9 is new enough to currently have RID on board. 4 of the remaining 8 are expected to have firmware updates from the manufacturer, which will bring on board remote ID on without the need to add external RID module. As a government agency, purchasing 4 RD modules for a 3-month period is not feasible, so we will have to ground some of the UAS. Since we cannot purchase 8 RID units when only 4 will ultimately be necessary following firmware updates. I know you're only the messenger, Steve, but this is a true hardship for us that may or will ground our UAS. I understand the conversation of as long as you're working on that direction is waiting for the firmware update for those said to becoming enough.
Yeah, I think that's a good statement at the last there is what it is. I mean, the phrase was thrown around as something called discretionary enforcement. I think they've thrown that phrase around a lot about that after the fact. But I think if you're doing due diligence and saying, I have a plan in place that we're going to do this, it's just that, you know, the supply chain is not supporting our plan right now, you know, then, I mean, I think the FAA is going to be reasonable about that is what it is. But again, before the 16th, we're gonna get some direction. We have to, is what it is. All right.
That's it.
All right. And the other one I want to talk about here real quickly is the idea of the ability to have a remote pilot and command operating 2 unmanned aircraft at the same time is what it is. And for those of you that are not familiar, there's some software out there that allows you to launch one aircraft, position it at a location when you're taking, sensor package of looking on the ground. When it reaches a specific power setting, you automatically or you manually will launch the second aircraft. It'll fly to the location where the first aircraft is located. it'll assume the sensor package video, if you will, if that's what it's doing. Then the first aircraft will fly back home, land, you'll change the batteries out, then it becomes the standby aircraft. While the second aircraft is assumed that role, you have constant surveillance on the location, which, which is probably invaluable to a lot of operations where you don't have multiple US teams that are operating at a location where you can have on board multiple operations. But in that case, so there's been submissions to the FAA on the approval of this, and it's in the FAA right now being reviewed. There are some concerns. I think it has to do with the data link between the product and the loss of link, and how that's going to happen, and more likely deconfliction between the two aircraft. That's the big discussions I've heard on there. We have been sort of prodding them to say, can we get this out of discussion and make some decision? And if so, can we just, if it's an issue with the way that the software is designed, or if it's an issue with deconfliction, if it's an issue with spectrum, whatever it is, let's get it back in the hands. Can we get it back in the hands of the applicant and let them, come up with a solution, if that's it, so that they can, we can move forward if that's the case. And so I know they're working on this. I actually prodded them just the other day on this, and they're having discussions with flight standards right now. So,
and hopefully we'll be able to see. Hopefully we'll be able to see something similar to the compliance list of saying that if you're going to do this, you have to comply by these things that address.
Yeah, and since this is a software package or something like that, it may be, so long it doesn't have to be maybe a specific vendor, but if the product is doing these things, if it's broadcasting on this spectrum, if the software is doing this and all that, then it can be approved. That makes sense. That way, you open the door to I don't want to say competition. Yeah, you open the door to competition so other people can get into it, and you'll get more product out there, which is really what we want anyway, as we're seeing now with remote ID. We want competition. We want the prices to be low. And so that's how we want to do that, is what it is. So anyway, that's all that I had right now. Oh, you've all seen this before. This is the contact numbers. If you've got questions, you can go to the help desk, the support desk, I should say. That's their contact information. If you've got questions about LEAP, there's a link there for LEAP, and you can get a hold of them. They'll get your local law enforcement assistance program pilot out there for you. There's Mike O'Shea's my contact information, and also John Meehan's on here too. I didn't get Kerry Fleming on here. Next time I do one of these, I'll add his name to this list also, is what it is. So having said all that, let's open it up to anybody who's got questions outside of that.
Yeah, so we have one question that says, apologies, this wasn't super clear. 249-gram drones don't have to comply with remote ID. Is that correct?
If it's operating as a recreational operator, and that's less than 0.55 pounds, I don't have the conversion in my head, but if it is, then they don't have to have remote ID, is what it is. If you're operating as under Part 107 and you have to have your aircraft registered, or you're operating as a public operator and you have to be registered, the weight does not matter. You have to have remote ID on the aircraft, or some other form of being able to do that, is what it is. FRIAs, federal restricted operating areas, is what it is. There have been some FRIAs approved. There's been a lot of them that have not been approved. And so I'm not real well versed on the FRIA and what's happening with that right now. But I know that there's a lot of discussion around the FRIAs right now. And for those of you that aren't familiar, it's the ability to identify an operating location where you don't have to broadcast remote ID. So long as you and the aircraft are within the FRIA itself, then you don't have to broadcast. Is what you still have to comply with all the other conditions of the operation, such as, you have to make sure if you're under 107, I should say, if you're operating in the FRIA, that in fact you're not in a location where you have to meet other airspace requirements, or you're not complying with, let's say, a TFR that might be stood up over the top of a FRIA in that case. Will the FAA put out an advisory circular regarding remote ID if they have any formal decisions due to the supply chain? I'm guessing, I know for sure it's going to be on the FAA.gov/UAS website. Definitely we'll do that. Whether they're going to put out a advisory circular, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to do that or not.
There was a lot of questions that came out. There were people there from private industry and public safety that said, hey, listen, we have certain aircraft coming in, certain aircraft going out. How can we go out and make this a more feasible system, because it becomes really problematic on the remote ID? You know, can we move it from one to the other if we've got one out of service? All those questions came up. They took all these questions down and said, we're going to have to go back and really look through this and come up with some answers. So I think you're going to see something else come out in some way of publication. I don't know if it's going to be specific circular, but they realize they need to come back to respond to everybody. This is not just a public safety issue.
Jack Hedges' comment there, will tactical beyond visual sign ever become automatic? Great idea. And the fact that I've already got, like I say, over 400 of these, it does make sense that, hey, listen, if it's for public safety, then yeah, it makes sense. It may be a provision in there like we have for the public safety and flight over people, because the public aircraft, the COAs that are issued to public agencies aren't necessarily specific to public safety agencies. It also applies to everybody else who's operating as a public aircraft operator, and that is, it could be your local, community, building company or building enforcement code people, or it could be your parks and recreation, or your public relation people that are operating as a public aircraft operator. Those kinds of things may not warrant itself well to having tactical beyond visualized sight being something there. So it may have a provision that makes it specific to public safety as part of a canned kind of clearance in the COA. But it's a great idea, and now that you said it, I'll probably start poking somebody about it.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. If you had a similar compliance checklist for tactical beyond visualized sight waiver, because you're basically saying you realize these are the limitations, and you check those boxes that you understand that you'll comply to that. And same thing with FRB loss. You could all do this in one COA, like you said, as long as it's directed to public safety agencies only. So if you click public safety, then you get these options. Otherwise, you don't. Would be tremendous.
Yeah. So will the public safety agency be able to obtain one remote ID module and move it from aircraft to aircraft? Actually, that question was asked about a week and a half ago, and I talked to one of the individuals that the experts on remote ID. And they said, you have to go into the drone zone when you register and identify the module that is associated with the aircraft for public and for civil Part 107 operators. So what you would have to do is have to go in there, pull it out of that one aircraft and transfer it over to another aircraft to be able to use one module for multiple aircraft. And I don't think that is going to be a simple thing to do, at least in my mind. Maybe it is simple, but that is something that I think I'll put it this way, they're aware of that, and that is a solution, but I don't think it's a great solution in my mind, because it's a lot of workload on the operator to have to do that, because they only have one module and they've got 5 aircraft and they have to move it around to different airplanes as they're flying, especially if I launch one and recover it and I want to launch a second aircraft. I've got to make sure that the module is associated with the right aircraft, which means if I'm using 2 airplanes all the time in one operation, then I'm going to have 2 modules is what I'm going to have, because running to your computer and changing it over on there doesn't make a lot of sense is what it is. Let's see here. Obviously, exact time isn't possible to give. How long of a process generally am I looking at for submitting a COA and getting approved? This will be my first time adding the waivers. Okay, so the good news here is that the fact that you already have a COA, it's approved in the system, and the only thing you're doing is going in and actually applying for a brand new COA. Everything in the application is exactly the same. If you applied for a blanket Class G COA, which gives you approval for Class G in the Code of the United States, or you've applied for a jurisdictional COA that gives you a specific operating area like the size of your city or your county, then when you go in and apply for the new one, they should be able to turn that around really quickly. I'm talking within 5 business days, again, depending on how busy the service center is in being able to process that application and get the document to their management to sign it off is what it is. And so that probably the best thing happened. I put the caveat in here because Charles and I talked about this earlier, just before we turned on the presentation for everybody here. We've got an issue with the Eastern Service Center, and they're having difficulty in processing beyond visual line of sight approvals in a timely fashion. And it's been brought to the attention of the FAA's Air Traffic Organization at headquarters in Washington, D.C., and they are working the issue right now. So I say 5 business days. I normally expect that if you're on the West Coast or if you're in the central part of the country, yeah, that's a pretty good number. If you're on the East Coast, yeah, I can't guarantee that right now. I can't guarantee it is what it is. Or if you sent me an email on day 6 and told me that it didn't happen and you were in Kansas City, I could maybe call somebody and find out what's going on with a new COA that's just replacing a regular one with a beyond visual line of sight. I probably am not going to be successful with the Eastern, at least right now. But like I said, they're working that issue with them right now, and hopefully we'll have some resolution here in the future, in the near future on that.
And drone responders is pushing hard on that too.
Yeah. So to my previous question, it seems redundant to apply for a COA, and when I have to apply for tactical, since the majority of tactical operations by my first responders requires tactical. Okay. Yeah, agree. Yep. Got it. Yep. And like I said, if we could make tactical beyond visual line of sight a provision of the COA as a standard provision, that would be wonderful. And we'll have to push that. I'm pushing a few other things right now that I can't really talk on the air about, but I'm trying to make it easier to not just process COAs, but make them get just something more than just multiple COAs. Maybe we can do it down to one COA or something like that.
And I think the FRB waiver kind of set a new precedent of being able to check the boxes to show compliance to expedite that process. So maybe that's something that could be in there. Yeah,
it does. Yeah. If I have a tactical drone with remote ID module, can I fly under tactical beyond line of sight with the module? The answer right now is apparently all indications are no. You have to, because it's beyond visual line of sight and you're going out a distance, the remote ID has to be part of the aircraft is what it has to be. So that becomes problematic for tactical beyond visual line of sight because the module itself is broadcasting from where the operator's at, and the aircraft is not at that location. It's actually somewhere else. So yeah, that's going to be a problem. And that's something everybody will have to be aware of. If you're getting COAs for beyond visual line of sight, you're going to have an aircraft that actually can broadcast from the aircraft. So if I remove the remote module, I have paperwork to fill out and pay $5. That's it. Yeah. So it's open right now for you to go in, and there's no charge for you to go ahead and redo your COA registration to show you've had remote ID. There's no charge. The $5 doesn't apply. I think obviously with what's going on right now with the supply chain issues, I think they're probably going to maybe leave that. It makes sense that they should leave that turned off right now while you're registering your aircraft. And frankly, it makes sense to me that why should there be an additional charge just to re-register your aircraft is what it is.
And that was one of the things they said more information will follow. That came out hard and heavy about especially people in business that are constantly changing aircraft they're using, as well as public safety. So that's going to be part of more guidance that follows.
And with some agencies that have upwards of a couple of hundred aircraft, that's not an inexpensive proposition is what it is. So yeah, that's something that has to be done. And what is it? Customs Border Protection. I think they've got like 3,000 operators right now. So it tells me they have quite a few aircraft they're flying is what they're doing. So I think they are one of with the exception of the U.S. government, they are the U.S. government, but with the exception of, other DOD, I think they're the largest user of operator of unmanned aircraft right now today. The U.S. Customs is what it is. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we have wrapped up all the questions. And, again, thank you very much for all the work that you've done for public safety. It is always very noticed about your due diligence and your work with us. And I can't say enough. And that's why we continually recognize the FAA and each of you all for what you do to help us. So, Steve, thanks for being here today. You did a great job filling in for Mike. You actually answered questions Mike couldn't answer. So it was a good day. Yeah, I probably said things I shouldn't have said too, but that's either it or there. Who knows? All right. Well, listen,
Alrighty.
hope to see you next month. Again, everyone, it's the second Wednesday of each month at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And Steve usually is on with us anyway. So we'll hope to see you next month. Wait, but we got a
Okay.
question? No, thanks. Thanks for the information. See
Okay.
you next time, Steve. Thanks everybody for
Okay.
being here.